For now, though, I want to discuss one of my favorite ads of all time. It's not as famous as some ads are, at least according to people who work in the ad industry. When you think of great ads, you typically think of like the Cadillac ad from 1915, the standard of the world and the penalty of leadership. Has anyone heard of that ad, the penalty of leadership? Okay, got one nerd in here. It ran one time in the Saturday Evening Post in 1915. What happened was, back then, most cars cost about $500. Ford had rolled out a vehicle that cost $500. Cadillac still sold for over $2,000. So they have a reputation today as being a premium vehicle, more expensive than a Chevy or a Ford or a Toyota. They did back then too. And most vehicles at that time were 4-cylinder vehicles. Then Packard came out with a 6-cylinder vehicle, and everyone was like, that's 5 horses, whatever it was. And so Cadillac says, well, if we're going to maintain our reputation as being the standard of the world, we're going to come out with an 8-cylinder engine, and it's going to kick everyone's ass, and everyone's going to love us and buy Cadillacs and be willing to pay 5 times as much money for a Cadillac, right? That didn't happen. It had tons of mechanical problems. Things were breaking down. Customers were complaining about the engineering reputation of Cadillac had been damaged, and people just didn't really trust the brand anymore. So they hired a consultant, Theodore McManus, who's probably one of the greatest advertising geniuses most people have never heard of. And this is in a time where advertising was starting to shift towards full-page color ads. Advertising was becoming a thing in the first couple decades of the 20th century. And he did something very contrarian. He wrote an essay about the penalty of leadership. So you can go on Google, if you just Google penalty of leadership, you can read this essay. And basically in an ad for Cadillac that never mentioned vehicles, never mentioned the engine, the 8-cylinder, none of that stuff. It just talked about the idea that if you are gonna make the decision that you're gonna be a leader, you will have haters. People will doubt you. You will have to deal with self-doubt. You will have to deal with failure in a way that most people don't who never take risks. And so it never even addressed the engineering failures and the customer service nightmare that was the V8 engine that they rolled out. But it was about what does it mean to be a leader? And it implied that if you buy a Cadillac, you are a leader, and you're okay with that risk because that's the type of person you are. It inspired Elvis so much that years later, it's rumored that apparently he kept a framed copy of this ad, The Penalty of Leadership, at his home in Graceland. I have a framed photo of this ad too because it's just badass. You should all go Google it. I mean, honestly, just do it right now. The rest of the speech is pretty boring, so you'll probably get more out of that. But it is a great ad that came out in 1915. So that's considered one of the best ads of all time. So there's some really cool ads if you look across history. I mean, obviously Apple's 1984 ad, which basically launched the Apple brand and only ever aired once. I don't have to tell you about that ad because most people are aware of it or remember it. I don't because it came out 7 years before I was even born, but I've seen it on YouTube. So there's many famous ads, but none of those are my favorite. The one ad that I feel stands the test of time as the most influential ad of all time was launched on July 4th, 1776. The ad agency that produced this was called the Continental Congress. Kind of a lame name, not as cool as Droga 5 or Wieden+Kennedy or other cool ad agencies today. In fact, it kind of sounds like a 90s grunge band that played at county fairs, the Continental Congress. Like one of those weirdo bands that combines banjo and a violin with the electric guitars and they think they're creating some new sound, the Continental Congress. It almost sounds like they're trying to sound more important than they really are. And yet, even with a lame name, this ad agency produced one of the greatest ads of all time. The creative director was Thomas Jefferson. The ad was, let's say it together, the Declaration of Independence. And so I want to argue that the Declaration of Independence was an ad because its purpose was persuasion. And so that's one thing I'll challenge you this afternoon is to stop thinking about advertising as being synonymous with the word annoying and start thinking of advertising as anything whose stated purpose is persuasion. Like for most of us, how do we define a millennial? It's someone younger than me who's annoying. And that doesn't matter if you're 75 or 35 or 18. A millennial is a general term for someone who's younger than you who is annoying. I want to challenge you to think about advertising in a new way. Advertising is just persuasion. A lot of us look at bad ads, or we've had experiences with bad ads. We skip ads on YouTube. We pay Netflix not to have to see ads. But really, I think we're opposed to bad ads, uninspiring ads, not advertising or persuasion itself. And that's an incredibly important distinction. And so going back to my favorite ad of all time, 250 years later, we forget that at the time of its writing, the colonies weren't even united in their belief that they could actually take on England and win. A motion for independence in the Continental Congress was actually made in June of that year, not July. But they realized several states still needed to be persuaded to sign it. So it wouldn't really be a powerful statement to the world if half the colonies weren't even interested in their own freedom. Again, I come back to marketing is literally creating a market for what you want to sell. The real goal of the Declaration of Independence wasn't giving a middle finger to the king, even if that's how we remember it. The real goal was persuading France to join us. The real goal was convincing the French that this was a winnable fight. It was persuasion. It was an advertisement. The problem with advertising is that when it's done really, really well, we stop calling it advertising. We beg the question, almost implying, well, that's an amazing piece of history, Tim, but that's not really advertising. We insinuate that once something becomes more transformative and inspiring and stands the test of time, it cannot possibly have been something as materialistic and selfish as advertising. Obviously, this begs the question. If something is created with the purpose of inspiring or persuading, it is, without a doubt, advertising. So again, most people don't oppose advertising, they oppose bad advertising. And this is an important distinction. The Declaration of Independence reminds us that advertising is inherently optimistic. It invites us into a better future. Have you ever seen an ad that tried to convince you that by buying this product or buying this service that your life will stay the same or get worse? No, even insurance doesn't do that, and insurance has to insure against a negative event. It's about making your life better so you can enjoy your life in the meantime, not worrying about what might happen. We take this for granted. Advertising is inherently optimistic. It's all about how your life could be better. The timeless message of American advertising is that the pain of apathy and regret and complacency is greater than the pain of investing in yourself, in taking risks and venturing beyond your comfort zone. Every day we see products advertised that we can't afford. And to afford them, we need to become the type of person who can afford them. That's the interesting thing about capitalism. You don't get more money by robbing people and taking their stuff. When an advertisement inspires you to want to buy something you currently cannot afford, the only reasonable route, and I use the word reasonable very intentionally there, okay? The only reasonable route to achieve that outcome is to become the best version of yourself. You have to add more value to the world to get paid more so that you can buy the things that you want that you saw advertised. Through this process, it's kind of a flywheel. Advertising is not only an information system that lets us know about cool new products, it's also an agent of transformation. It inspires us to become the person we need to become to afford the life we want to live. That's not morally neutral, that's morally heroic. Advertising is the gasoline to capitalism's fire. That's why I think keeping score and running the rat race is a good thing. You know, my grandpa is 95 years old. He still works 40 hours a week. He loves the rat race. He loves the creative challenge of work. Most Americans intuitively understand this, even if we're not very good at explaining it. I think one of the most tragic things happening in our culture today is the obsession with sheltering kids from the reality of the real world. I know that Isaac talked a lot about that this morning. It's something I really believe in my company because I've hired a lot of young kids, many actually from Isaac's companies, Crash and Praxis. There is such a thing in the real world as winning and losing. The real world keeps score because deep down we know that life is more enjoyable when you can actually enjoy your victories. Keeping score and being aware of our progress is inherently satisfying, even when it means sometimes you need to admit defeat. We're happiest when we are striving towards something. Sheltering young people from that is robbing them of experiencing what I believe is the deepest, most meaningful emotion that can come in life, is the joy of achievement. Advertising inspires us to achieve more, to buy more, to invest more, and we're deluding ourselves if we think this is a bad thing. I mean, really, what makes Americans Americans is that we're almost allergic to settling down. We want to make progress, damn it. We don't want to live the same life 20 years from now that we're living today. That's why we blazed the Oregon Trail. 100 years later, we got bored, so we decided to go to the moon. Now Elon Musk and other entrepreneurs are planning to take us to Mars. My friend Joe Quirk is launching companies that'll build floating cities on the ocean. even though land still seems to work pretty well today. We are relentless as Americans in our pursuit for more. We are eternally discontent. And this discontent is largely fueled by the American culture of advertising. It's both an effect and a cause. Advertising can even be profitable. Sometimes we just assume that advertising is an expense on the income statement, where a company pays money to place an ad, and cash is flowing out of the business, not into the business. But sometimes great ads are profitable in and of themselves, regardless of how much it boosts the sales of the products they're promoting. Consider the Lego movie. Most of us think the reason we signed up for Netflix or Hulu or Amazon Prime is because we want to skip the ads. I hate commercials. That's why I love Netflix. Right? But how would you explain then people paying $20 to see a 2-hour infomercial? It's literally called the Lego movie. If Nike came out with a movie and called it the Nike movie, we'd all be like, okay, that's an ad, right? It's literally called the Lego movie. If you think Super Bowl ads are expensive, I have some numbers on here. If you think Super Bowl ads are expensive, this ad had a budget of $60 million. But here's the interesting part. It created nearly $400 million in worldwide revenue at the box office. So Lego, which is a company in Denmark, I believe, created a net profit on this of $250 million with an ad. $250 million of profit before they sold a single Lego from the movie. Just the success of the ad itself created $250 million, which is more money than most of us will make in our lifetime on an ad. In other words, people don't just dislike advertising, they actually enjoy it. There's no better proof than the willingness to pay to consume great advertising. I saw it in theaters twice. That'd be like using your TiVo or whatever it's called now to go rewind and watch commercials again voluntarily and paying money to do that. So again, there's no better proof than the willingness to pay to consume an ad. And the ad worked too to generate more sales. I have here on the screen 15%. That's how much their sales went up in the year that this movie came out. They became the world's best-selling toy company, and they're still privately owned. What makes this even more interesting is that last number, 30%. That's their profit margin. And they're the best-selling toy company in the world. They literally make plastic-colored bricks. There is nothing proprietary or super scientific about that, and yet they have 30% profit margins as a private company. When you're good at telling stories, people will buy your stuff and they'll pay you just to hear the story. When I was a kid growing up, some of my greatest memories are actually building Lego cities with my brother. It was one of the few times you could be as creative as you wanted to be with no constraints on your imagination. We almost never followed the rules and actually built the set that we bought. Each set came with instructions, but we ignored them. We built our own creations. This is because I think my childhood was before the age of the internet. And growing up before the internet, I think you have a different perspective on life. I'm one of the last years of youth who remember growing up before the internet. Even my younger sister, who's only, 6 years younger than me, she doesn't really have any meaningful memories of what life was like before the internet. Because by the time she grew up and she was reading and everything, we had a computer, we had internet in the house. She doesn't really remember what it was like growing up and not being able to just pull out a tablet computer or go on the internet and watch whatever, play whatever games. I do. If you were born before the year 1995, I was, you still have memories of what life was like before the internet, before everyone was online all the time. Most of the people in this room, I'm guessing most were born before the year 1995. Caitlin, wherever you are, I know that you weren't. You were born in like 2014 or something like that. If you were born before the year 1965, you may still have memories of what life was like before color television, or even television itself. But if you were born before the year 1925, that's when things get interesting. If you were born before the year 1925, you have access to almost 200 years of life experience. Because life didn't really change all that much between 1800 and 1925 to now. You have access to almost 200 years of life experience. If you were born before the year 1925, you still remember what it was like before electricity, before indoor plumbing, on a cold, winter night, going outside and using an outhouse because there wasn't running water with toilets, especially if you grew up in rural America. If you were born before the year 1925, you still remember riding around on horseback. You may have known someone who died from polio. Growing up before 1925 gives you a really, really unique perspective on human history, maybe more so than any other generation in all of human history, because you have access to almost 200 years of life experience because of the rate of technological change that happened or didn't happen prior to that. Have you ever thought about it like that? It's very interesting. This is a photo of my grandpa Ted and my grandma Audrey. He was born before the year 1925. He's still alive today. And the scope of progress that he's experienced in his lifetime blows my mind. He grew up in rural Minnesota, riding around on horseback, did not experience electricity until he went to the army during World War II, because at home, they didn't have it until he came back from Japan. And now, someone who works for him at his company has a Tesla, which is a self-driving car. He was middle-aged when we went to the moon. His grandfather would have been of the age when we blazed the Oregon Trail, and in his lifetime, we went to the moon. There was not that rate of progress from the year 1200 to 1400 or the year 400 to 700. In fact, during much of the Dark Ages, there was negative progress. And yet he's experienced all that in his lifetime. 2 summers ago, I went on a vacation with him to a lake cabin in a northern Minnesota. And one day for lunch, we were going to grill some steaks. And one thing when you're born before the year 1925 is that you always control the grill. The steak is your domain, and I am not allowed to touch it. And so he's grilling the steaks, and I'm just standing, watching, there for emotional support more than anything. And he gets up and walks away. And I said, "Grandpa, where are you going? I'm thinking, maybe he's at that age where I need to remind him there's steaks on the grill and there's a live fire there and someone should monitor it, ideally not me." And he's like, "Oh, no, it's fine." And as he turns around, he pulls his iPhone out of his shirt pocket. Also, when you're born before the year 1925, you carry your smartphone in your shirt pocket right here. And he pulls out his iPhone, and he has this twinkle in his eye, and he just looks at me. And he tells me that, "Oh no, it'll tell me when it's ready." My 95-year-old grandfather downloaded an app on his iPhone that sends him a push notification when his steak is medium rare. Let me repeat that. My 95-year-old grandfather downloaded an app on his iPhone that sends him a push notification when his steak is medium rare. None of the words in that sentence would make any sense to someone 100 years ago. And yet that's the reality that he lives in. That's the reality that we live in. It was pretty good. I remember the salmon was burnt, but that's because my brother made it, not him. The The scope of that change, again, in one human lifetime, is incredible. He grew up without electricity, and now he has magic telling him when his steak is medium rare. It's incredible. So what caused that? How did we make so much progress in just the last 100 years when up until this point, calling it progress is almost generous, because what was really all that different from 1800 to 1850, from 1800 to 1900? Not a whole lot. What caused that? Because even going back to like the 1700s, 1800s, we had science, we had technology, we had engineers and researchers. We even had the banking system and venture capitalists. We had free markets, we had capitalism. So it's not as easy as saying, well, private property rights and free markets, because we had that back then too. So what really changed? I would argue, in a word, advertising. The 20th century was the age of advertising. What was most different in American culture in, let's say, the year 1920 from 1820 was there was a lot more commercial advertising messages. Close your eyes for a second. Let's imagine that I dropped you off on an island in the middle of nowhere with nothing but a hatchet. How long would it take you to send me an email? You can open your eyes now. That's the scope of progress that we made. Have you ever stopped and thought about that? We went from hatchets to sending emails to push notifications telling us when our steak is medium rare in one human lifetime. I think advertising has a lot to do with it. It's not the entire explanation, of course, but what's interesting is that when we discuss the impact of free markets and free societies and the capitalist system and philosophy, almost no one mentions advertising. It's not even in the discussion. So I'm not going to make the claim that the only reason we have our modern standard of living is advertising, but it should certainly be part, at least be part of that discussion. So again, what really changed? I think it's ads, because prior to the age of advertising, around the turn of the 20th century, if you were the CEO of some manufacturing company and you made $1 million in profit, you didn't really have a whole lot of incentive to reinvest that back into R&D, back into your company to scale, because your market for your products was mostly local or regional. It was based on word of mouth for the most part. And so if you made $1 million, you'd probably go buy a yacht, you'd buy a second home, or maybe even a third home. But what you usually wouldn't do is invest all that back into growth and R&D and more products, because if I started something in Salt Lake City, my market was usually 25 miles around Salt Lake City. What advertising did is it completely transformed the incentive structure for companies, specifically as it related to R&D. If you reinvested profits back into your company, back into R&D to create better innovations and more products, advertising meant that thanks to communications technology, your market wasn't 25 miles around Salt Lake City. Your market was the world. And so it made a much greater return and incentivized entrepreneurs and CEOs to invest back into their company rather than removing all the profits and just enjoying it. We have advertising largely to thank for that, and it's usually never even mentioned in discussions about our modern standard of living. And yet, that completely changed the incentive structure. I know this because if I asked you off the top of your head to name a company that was founded in the 1700s, most of us can't. If I ask you to name a company that was started in the 1800s, still most of us can't off the top of your head. But if I ask you to name a company that was founded in the last 100 years, that's pretty easy. Apple, Amazon, Disney, Nike, Ford, the list goes on and on and on. It's because these companies advertised. And they grew faster than ever before. And the faster the economic growth, the faster they can reinvest back into R&D and increase our standard of living. Hatchet, email. But we never really even mention advertising in this discussion of our economic growth and our standard of living. But advertising is the reason that companies are no longer primarily local and a sole proprietorship. They're national and even international. And so the list of countries I have on here is the top 10 list of nations around the world that spend the most money on advertising. There's some names that you've probably heard of: the United States, Canada, France, Norway, Sweden.
Is that per capita? Is that per capita?
It's the total.
Oh, the total.
Yep. And so if I hadn't told you, though, that it was a list of the top 10 countries who spend the most on advertising, you might just think it's a list of the top 10 countries with the highest standard of living. But it is a list of the top 10 countries who spend the most on advertising. And so clearly, there's a link between advertising, research and development, and in the long run, our standard of living. I'm not quite going to make the case that it's pure causation, but certainly it's correlated. Certainly it's correlated. So as Craig mentioned, I'm a marketer. I own a marketing agency and a marketing software company. And so I love a good old-fashioned split test. Has anyone seen this photo before? This is a photo that NASA took a couple years ago. It's of North Korea and South Korea. Taken at night, look at the difference between North Korea and South Korea. I mean, maybe you could argue North Korea is just really green and they care about the environment and they're trying to keep their carbon footprint down. But I would argue there's something deeper going on there. What could possibly have caused that? What is the real difference between North Korea and South Korea? And let's go beyond politics, because obviously we can answer the question with a political answer. What is the difference between North Korea and South Korea? What is one thing that's really, really present in South Korea? Because keep in mind, South Korea was on that last list I showed you that's not present in North Korea. One of these societies has more ads. I mean, keep in mind, the Korean people have the same bloodlines. The only real distinction, these are the same families, is in their politics on this imaginary line that's right down the middle. People in North Korea are on average 3 inches shorter than people in South Korea. If I told you that people in Salt Lake were 3 inches shorter than people in Boise, you would demand an explanation. What is going on? What is causing that? And yet, no one ever explores the specifics of the commercial system as it relates to advertising. Which society has more ads? That's not a question you ever hear asked. Which society has more ads? Which society would you rather live in? Which one sounds more fun? In North Korea, there's not vibrant nightlife. People probably aren't having fun during the daytime either. But in South Korea, it looks like a party. Who's seen that music video, by the way, Gangnam Style? Yeah, so that's however 5 years old, whatever it is now, and yet we've heard about it all the way over here in the United States because of advertising, because they have a free society, we have a free society. So of course, there's always a political answer, there's always an economic answer, but if you ever just looked at different countries and different societies and been like, which one has more ads? Which society would I rather live in, one with ads or one with guns? Because that really is the choice that we have. Persuasion or force. Advertising or violence. Advertising is just voluntary persuasion. It's me respecting you so much that if I want to get you to do something or to buy something, I have to appeal to your rationality and your best sense of what you think is best for you. I can't force you to do it. The more advertising there is in a society, the more that society respects free will. I went to Calvin College in Grand Rapids, Michigan, and I only lasted a year there because it was really expensive, and you could imagine at a college named after Calvin, it was not a bastion of free will philosophy. And yet, At a philosophical level, sometimes we forget that advertising is one of the, it's both, I would argue, a leading indicator and a lagging indicator of how much a culture values free will. Advertising means that even though a company, a big evil corporation with billions of dollars, they can't force you to buy anything. They have to spend some of their money to convince you, and you could still say no. Historically, that's really cool, that people with all the money and all the power can use that money and power, and still, I have a choice, and I can be like, no, I don't really want that. Where you find smoke, you find fire. Where you find advertising, you find a free and open society. I love seeing ads because it's just a constant reminder that we live in a society that values free will. Another reason I love advertising is that it's really raw capitalism. Like, it's capitalism distilled, like the most pure, concentrated form of commerce is I have something to sell, I'm going to convince you to buy it. That is advertising in a nutshell. You can complain about TV ads are boring or I want to skip, but this is raw capitalism. So no wonder people hate it. Like the essence of a free market and a free society and embracing this idea of voluntary persuasion is that if you want someone to do something, whether it's buying your product or service, going on a date with you, investing in your company, you have to convince them to do it. Advertising is a celebration of autonomy. No wonder progressives and Marxists hate it. Advertising is one of those things where it's viewed with such a negative connotation and reputation that I believe if you can successfully, philosophically defend advertising, you have defended capitalism itself. It's the hardest thing to defend in all of the various elements of capitalism and the things that people can attack, whether it's the price system or income inequality, or that some people are born with wealthy parents and some aren't, or that some countries have natural resources and some do not. Advertising is the hardest to defend because it's hard to say, why is advertising good for the economy? Couldn't companies just lower their prices and spend less money on ads? Most people have never really thought out a philosophical defense of advertising, and I can make a practical defense of all the reasons that it expands the markets for products and gives you more money for R&D and generally does make the world a better place as a utilitarian argument. But what's far more interesting to me is the philosophical argument of choice. Being free, having free will. Advertising assumes that there's some sort of inherent value in being free and being able to make decisions for yourself. So I asked before who would be for arranged marriage if we got rid of all that, because it is pretty damn efficient, right? I mean, the whole dating thing, all the money we spend on dinners and perfumes and dressing up and dating websites, the whole love industry is pretty inefficient if the goal is just getting married. So if there's an argument from efficiency, arranged marriage is a pretty cool setup if you think about it. Unless you actually inherently value the game and the dance of persuasion, of advertising. Have you ever thought about dating like advertising? That's the magic and the whimsy of living in a free society, or I would argue of capitalism itself, is the information gathering process of trying to learn who do I like, who am I attracted to, who will I say yes on a date, who gets a second date. You enjoy the process itself, right? No one with a straight face would say dating it's just a necessary evil to get married. It's just a means to an end. Almost all rock and roll songs are really love songs talking about how fun it is dating and the whole pursuit, life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. There's some sort of joy in the discovery process, and that's what advertising is. It's just that in our personal lives, we don't call it that, right? So if you're not for arranged marriage because that's just somehow evil or wrong or people should be given more choice, you have no moral or philosophical foundation to attack advertising or, as a result, capitalism. It's just honoring that same premise that if I think fundamentally that being free to make my own decisions and persuading other people while I'm being persuaded is an inherent good, that's the reason we don't have arranged marriage. It's the same reason I embrace advertising and capitalism itself. Again, if you can philosophically, successfully defend advertising in a moral framework, not just on how it benefits GDP or how it increases product sales and boosts quarterly earnings reports. If you can successfully morally defend advertising, you've defended capitalism itself on probably the hardest argument or the most difficult argument there is, because most people inherently hate advertising. Even far left liberal economists and professors and thinkers at salon.com, they have to be like, okay, yeah, fine, capitalism has helped our standard of living. They all admit that, okay, yes, all things being equal, people are better off in 2019 than they were in 1819. So they accept the economic argument. What they don't accept is the moral argument. It's the same thing with capitalism. It's the same thing with advertising. We all know we've won the economic argument. We've won it for over 100 years. And that's the ironic thing, is that the reason that most countries and our society, to the extent that we don't embrace capitalism, it's because we're advertising it really poorly. Because from a product perspective, we have a superior product. I mean, we won the economic and the mathematical arguments and the historical arguments years ago. We have an advertising problem with capitalism. And if you defend advertising morally, you've defended capitalism itself. I also think advertising is interesting because it inspires us to achieve more, to become the type of person that we need to become to afford the life we want to live. And so if you want, let's say you see an ad on TV for a cool pair of, sneakers. In a capitalist society, you can't just go steal them, or at least you can't do so sustainably over time, because eventually you'll get caught. What really has to happen is you see it, you want it, and you have to become the type of person who can provide enough value to the world at your job or as an entrepreneur, coming up with a more valuable company that serves the world so that you can make more money, so that you can afford the lifestyle you see being advertised. That's aspirational. And usually when we use the word aspirational, it has a positive connotation, does it not? So why do we think advertising is icky and gross and for lesser humans that haven't evolved? Advertising is amazing. It's naturally optimistic. It's naturally aspirational. Every ad is a message telling you that your life could be better. Just because you have to pay a price to achieve it doesn't mean that that's wrong or immoral. I want to show you quick one of my favorite ads that I think just proves this point so effectively. And I mentioned the ad from Cadillac from 1915, the penalty of leadership. It was, an essay about being a leader and how the view never changes unless you're the top dog. This is a new ad from Cadillac. Well, it's new. I think it came out in 2014 or 2015. And notice that nowhere in this ad does it really mention the car, any of the features or anything. This ad is about what it means to be an American and frankly why Americans are superior to Europeans. Because Cadillac doesn't care if Europeans hate them. They're advertising to Americans. And so this ad just embraces the idea of the American self-made man, and I get all on like a testosterone high and I want to go out and buy a Cadillac, and I did. Because this ad got me so excited about yeah, I want to be that type of person in that ad. And that's what good ads do, is they're inspiring, they're aspirational. So this is just I think it's a 30-second ad, but notice that the ad is about the type of person you need to become to afford the product being advertised.
Why do we work so hard? For what? For this? For stuff? Other countries, they work, they stroll home, they stop by the cafe, they take August off. Off. Why aren't you like that? Why aren't we like that? Because we're crazy, driven, hard-working believers, that's why. Those other countries think we're nuts. Whatever. Were the Wright brothers insane? Bill Gates, Les Paul, Ali. Were we nuts when we pointed to the moon? That's right. We went up there, and you know what we got? Bored. So we left. Got a car up there, left the keys in it. Do you know why? Because we're the only ones going back up there, that's why. But I digress. It's pretty simple. You work hard, you create your own luck, and you gotta believe anything is possible. As for all the stuff, that's the upside of only taking 2 weeks off in August. N'est-ce pas?
And so again, I love that ad because it's aspirational. It's not about the product. It's about deeper values and the philosophy of the type of man who buys a Cadillac. And to the extent that we can recapture that sense of awe and aspiration, that is probably the reason most of us got so attracted to the Fountainhead or to Atlas Shrugged or to the ideas of Ayn Rand, is because it appeals to our highest sense of self, not our lowest. Advertising is pretty cool when it does that. That's what these guys did with the Declaration of Independence. It was an ad to convince a skeptical country that a better life is possible. And really, technically, fun fact, it was a print ad. We've often seen the handwritten version of the Declaration of Independence. But what most people never thought of is like the printing press was invented, hundreds of years before that, right? So why wasn't it just printed on a press and distributed? It was. But remember, I said the purpose of this document was not just, hey, we want to be free. We're making an official announcement, I guess. They hand wrote it because it was an act of persuasion. By hand writing it, it persuaded France that these guys have skin in the game. They just signed their names to something that could cost them their lives and all their property. It was an act of persuasion to not only convince the remaining colonies that we're still kind of skeptical, but to convince France that this was a winnable fight, that these guys have skin in the game. So even though the printing press was invented hundreds of years before that, they chose to handwrite it because they thought it would be more persuasive because it was an ad. Thank you.
Thank you so much. So I grew up a Buddhist, a philosophy that's pretty agreeable with objectivism. And in Buddhism, we are taught about the middle path, taking the middle path. Indulging yourself too much in anything is like not good. So I think even in when you talk about morality of more, is there a point of diminishing returns? How do you define that point?
Yeah, so of course, if you see an ad and it's for Applebee's eating good in the neighborhood and there's half off appetizers after 9, and you're eating a low-carb diet and you're trying to get in shape for a bodybuilding competition, it's probably not a good idea to go eat unlimited boneless wings at Applebee's. So saying that I value advertising, or that I think advertising is a profoundly moral institution, and it's a feature, not a bug, of capitalism.
Okay.
When I say that, I'm not saying that all advertisements means we should always listen to them. In the same way that if you're arguing or debating something, you don't always just listen to what the other person says. You don't allow yourself to be persuaded. That's not what I'm getting at. You have to have your own code of values, and as Craig talked about in his opening talk here at TOSCon, being an independent thinker is incredibly important. But the institution of advertising itself trying to persuade us is a constant reminder that we do have free will and we're capable of making those decisions. Does that answer your question?
Cool. Yeah, thank you.
All right, so as a sales and marketing guy, I definitely appreciated your talk. One of the cars I've always wanted is like a Lamborghini, not sure what kind, but I never see ads for Lamborghini, and I don't even think they do advertise. Why do you think that is?
They don't need to.
Right.
Yeah, because everyone knows that a Lamborghini is what, $200,000, $300,000, is that right?
Oh, he said that they advertise in movies.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. but they're not doing traditional advertising.
Right,
So again,
right.
that actually goes back to my point of start thinking of advertising as persuasion.
Right.
You know,
I wasn't aware of that they
Yeah.
did that, right?
that is a really good point. Advertising is not the act of buying a 30-second TV spot
Right.
or buying a print ad or putting ads on Facebook or Instagram or whatever. Advertising is just having a strategic system of persuasion. And so obviously Lamborghini, by definition that they're in high demand, has done a really good job of that.
Right. All right. Well, like,
Thank you for the talk. It was great. I realized that this talk was in itself a great ad for the T-shirt you're wearing.
Yeah.
Is it available anywhere?
I think my co-founder has some in his basement. We ordered a bunch of shirts for our company platform, and a lot of our clients we work with are by no means objectivists or libertarians or philosophically inclined at all. We work with a lot of real estate brokerages and real estate offices. That's kind of our niche that platform has built our ad business and marketing business in. And we made this shirt because I want to constantly proclaim our philosophy even to people that wouldn't normally be reading Atlas Shrugged. In the last week, I've had about half dozen of our clients, because I constantly post about it and I wear this shirt, ask like, what does it mean? And I explain, well, it's obviously based on the, make love, not war, make ads, not bombs, but it's deeper than just a catchy tagline. It means that in general, a society that has more advertising is a more free and open society and less likely to resort to violence to solve problems. Either way, society is going to be regulated, either with violence or persuasion. I think advertising is probably a better way to convince people to do things than machine guns. So I've had, like I said, half dozen of our clients just in the last week post pictures on social media that they bought Atlas Shrugged because they saw me post about it, or they bought the Fountainhead because they saw me post about it, which I think is pretty cool. So I have no idea the impact that wearing this is going to make, but I can tell you that I've had people message me and tag me in posts saying that, oh, this is a huge book, but I'm going to try reading it and it's good so far. They just bought Atlas Shrugged. So
Nice, awesome.
Yeah.
Thank you.
So if you buy something from Kroger, then the company knows what you shop for and they will target you for that kind of ads. Similar things to buying things from other companies or using services and them selling that list of clients to someone who would market to you. But what about when your phone screen is black, the phone is off, you're not using it, and you're having a private conversation, and all of a sudden you start seeing ads based on the conversation you had. Like for example, try saying Korean skincare products, something maybe you've never talked about. Try saying that
Sure.
around your phone, and then it'll start popping up in your Facebook Messenger. How do you reconcile advertising being a benefit to us and enriching to us, and possibly violating our privacy?
yeah, I think I'd answer the question by saying I'd rather live in a society where the biggest issue of privacy is someone showing me too many ads versus government thugs breaking into my house and invading my privacy that way. That being said, usually when you see ads that you thought, oh, they were listening into my conversations, because of Alexa or because of something I said when my phone was over there, it's actually because of the pixels and the data that advertisers are using right now, based on the pages you like and the websites you visited. If you use a Chrome browser, Google owns Chrome, so Google will show you ads the next time you go on Google based on what you've searched for, and you opt into all that by using those. And so really the price of Chrome, even the reason Gmail is free and Chrome is free, is advertising. Almost like, have you guys seen that Hans Rosling video where he talks about the washing machine and how it led to higher literacy rates amongst women? Yeah? So he opens up a washing machine on stage and it's this big reveal, it's all dramatic, and he pulls books out of it because the invention of the washing machine, almost more than any other product or technological innovation, is what led women and girls to start reading more, because now they didn't have to spend 20 hours a week doing the laundry. And so he pulls books out of a washing machine to show that this innovation, thanks to technology and capitalism, leads to this positive social outcome. I kind of view advertising the same way. Advertising is the reason Facebook exists, and it's the reason I'm speaking at this conference. It's how I met Craig. It's how I built this company. It's how I met my wife. And if advertising is the price to pay for all those things, I think that's a really, really good trade-off. And if you don't want to, absorb those costs, then don't use those products, because there are
like iPhone or
alternatives.
Facebook, the price for that is advertising, you mean? Okay.
Yeah, I mean, obviously Facebook doesn't charge people, but the last time I checked in the last year, I think domestically they make about $7 a month per user in the United States, and so they would have to charge at least that to not have ads. And actually, they have to charge a lot more than that, because if Facebook even started charging $1, it would totally shift the demand curve, and probably 95% of people would quit. So yeah, I understand the question you're asking, and if anyone's ever spying on you without your consent, then I would be opposed to that. You know, I don't think they should be doing that if that's what they're doing, but pretty much every time that someone thinks that's happening, it's actually because of your browsing history and all the pages you've liked, your connections. Facebook and Google and these big tech companies typically know what you are interested in or the decisions you're about to make before you do.
Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah.
Aspiring for more and the pursuit of more, is that the concept of rational greed? And do we have to use that term like we use rational selfishness and get it out there and get people used to the idea?
Yes, I think we do, because this goes back to the reason when I read, I think, Atlas Shrugged when I was 18, and I just loved it, because it was the first time I had ever read something or encountered this idea that I didn't have to apologize for being ambitious. You know, when it's not in a strictly economic or business context, we don't hate on basketball players that show up to practice early and shoot free throws and stay late and shoot free throws because they're trying to get better than other people. They're trying to advance their basketball career. We don't hate on that. We salute that. We love that hustle and that hard work and that ambition of trying to get better and putting in the time. So yes, I absolutely think that we need to recover the drive to become more valuable in life, so that you can make more money and afford to buy the things that you see advertised. I think that's absolutely a profoundly moral thing. It's not just morally neutral, it's morally heroic. Like advertising, I said, is the fuel to capitalism's fire.